Hello, everybody. Welcome to See Red Fred and the Knights of the Roundball Table. The purpose of the show is to bring some of the greatest minds in Bulls Nation together to talk about pressing Bulls topics of the day. On every show, I will try to balance out opinions with thought leaders from various parts of Bulls Nation, from the mountains of Sea Red to the swamps of Doggable. Tonight's guests are, from the Big Red Bus and the Bulls Beat podcast, the great one, the Podfather, Doug Thonus.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the first show.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you on, the Podfather. From the Chicago Bullseye, many moons ago, but still an occasional visitor, Mark Lewinthal.
Good to be here, Fred. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, my friend. Friend of years, friend of tears. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see
and
you.
Finally, from the Bulls on Tap podcast, frequent Chicago Bullseye guest and legend of Bulls Twitter, at Bulls Scripted, Keith Frantz.
How you boys doing? I'm glad to be here for the first meeting of the round table.
And with that, hear ye, I am C. Red Fred, and I call together the Knights of the Roundball Table to order. Let's go to issue number one. Issue number one, the rotating rotation. With the Red Leviathan set to sow destruction on the 23rd of December, it's clear to me that 8 players have solidified their presence in the rotation. Those players are Zach LaVine, Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Otto Porter Jr., Wendell Carter Jr., Lauri Markkanen, Tomas Satoransky, and Chandler Hutchinson. Assuming Coach Donovan runs with a 9 at the most 10-man rotation, which of the remaining players will be part of this rotation? The players who I think are fighting for those remaining 1 or 2 spots are Garrett Temple, Daniel Gafford, Thad Young, and Ryan A. An injury has put Denzel out of the discussion. So to me, just Chandler Hutchinson clearly played his way into the rotation during the preseason. So which one of these remaining players do you feel will be part of the rotation? Let's start out with Doug Thonus for this one.
It kind of surprises me that you think Chandler Hutchinson is just like a lock in that. You know, I just that's an odd take to say he's a lock. I think he's probably there, but Thad Young has to be a lock over Hutchinson, in my opinion. And then after that, I think it's just going to come down to matchups. If you're going big, you're going to play Gafford. Maybe they'll give Denzel a look here and there, even though you think he's probably out. Arcidiacono will probably get a look here or there, depending how Sato does. But I think it's just going to be matchups all around. They got a lot of guys that are kind of similar in that, 9 to 12 spot. None of those guys really stand out, so it'll just depend what you need on the night.
Keith.
I think you might see Temple more as a lock in Hutch's spot there, as we're kind of piggybacking off what Doug said. And matchup-wise, we've seen Lauri playing a lot of 5 on the backup units against OKC, and the Rockets, who play smaller, don't really have a traditional big. So I think on nights where that's the case, we'll see Lauri play the 5 with that at the 4 at times. But when you have a more traditional big, we'll probably see more Gafford, since outside of maybe Felicio, he's kind of the only traditional big that we have on the roster.
All right, Mark.
Well, I, too, am in agreement with Doug that I'm pretty surprised that you're putting Chandler Hutchinson immediately in the rotation for us. I mean, I think it's a tough call. I mean, I think the top 7 are pretty obvious. So I agree that's probably based upon matchups. I mean, I think, most of our bench, the good players on the bench typically are bigger guys. So I think you're going to need some of the backcourt guys. So I think, Sato, to Garrett Temple, I think that they'll be playing a lot. And then I would say Thad Young would round it out. But, I mean, if Chandler Hutchinson, when he gets his opportunities, if he plays the way that he did in preseason, I could see him getting more opportunities. And, I guess it just depends against the teams we go up against.
I'm kind of shocked you all are so surprised that Hutch didn't make this rotation. He was clearly, to me, one of our top 3 players in the preseason. He absolutely played his way into the rotation. And for a team so devoid of perimeter defenders, he's essential. You have to have him to go out there and stop the best 2 and 3s that we see, maybe even 4s on a night-to-night basis, which there are a ton in the NBA. And I think there's no doubt he's the best answer for us on the perimeter. Who else would be better than him?
Temple, the veteran that you brought in on a mid-level exception, who decided to come to the Bulls and didn't come here to sit on the bench.
And maybe no one. Maybe he is the best perimeter defender, but is he that much better? And he doesn't give you a whole lot on offense. And so I just don't know that he's like the best player left. And I could just see him being passed over. It wouldn't shock me if he plays a decent amount of minutes. I mean, he's sort of like the small forward, power forward version of Chris Dunn out there. I think he can make things happen. I just don't think he's a lock. He's going to be fighting like everyone else.
Yeah, and I think the offense is a big issue. I think that the biggest problem I see with our team is the lack of depth offensively coming off the bench. So, I mean, from that standpoint, I think that you're going to need to have guys that can score.
All right. Well, you guys are all pretty close. The correct answer is there's 8 players in the rotation that I named, and the other 2 that will make in the 10-man rotation are Garrett Temple and Thad Young. Ryan A. and Daniel Gafford will be sitting with Denzel and waiting for their turn with the inevitable injuries that always occur, or God forbid, COVID. Let's go on to issue 2. Should PATWILL start or sit? As C-Red Fred correctly predicted, Isaac Okoro has been the best rookie so far in the preseason on both ends of the court. He is already the Cavs' best player and has saved the Toilet City from irrelevancy. But no one can deny the other major rookie talent within the Central Division, the Bulls' tour de force named Patrick Williams. The Bulls' young forward at 6'9", 225, appears ready to contribute immediately to the imminent turnaround for the beloved Bulls. He has already shown significant progress and growth on both ends of the floor. He appears to be a key member of the Red Leviathan. One should fully expect he will be a force in the Eastern Conference for years to come. My question for you, Keith Frantz. Should Patrick Williams start or come off the bench?
I mean, I think similar to last year, we're seeing Otto Porter Jr. coming into camp a step slow, a little out of it, still kind of in Halloween party mode out there. So why not? I mean, in terms of the future of this roster, Otto's probably playing for a spot on a different team next year. You got to see if Pat can carve out that role as a small forward, or if he's a 4 and you're moving on from Lowry in the offseason. So I think the questions that you get answered by putting Patrick in as a starting small forward, make a lot of things more clear for you throughout the season than starting Otto would.
Doug.
Well, if Otto Porter didn't come into camp and on the James Harden food diet plan, then maybe I could say we should definitely start Porter. But I'm kind of with Keith on this one, even though I wouldn't have suspected it. I look kind of through the preseason stats, and I think Patrick Williams might have been the Bulls' third best player after Kobe and Zach. So I think maybe he's even earned it scarily enough. And it's not even just about that it's the best thing to do to answer questions. It might actually be the best thing to do to generate wins. So I can't believe I'm saying it, but yeah, I think Patrick Williams might be your starter.
Mark.
I still think the amount of emphasis that you put on preseason is absolutely unbelievable. Because if I have to hear about Isaac Okoro every single Bulls game with the comparisons to Patrick Williams, I'm not going to be able to handle it. But I would say yes. I mean, it's preseason. We didn't really play great teams during the preseason either. So, he looked good in the few games he played. And I think you're going to see a lot of rookie mistakes as you normally do. I do think though that you need offense coming off the bench, and a veteran presence in Otto Porter, somebody that can score. I think is going to be very valuable coming off the bench. So I think maybe you give Williams his spot or his opportunity at the beginning of the season, but I definitely don't think that he's a lock, because if he's having a lot of growing pains as things are going on, turning over the ball a lot, not making good decisions, and screwing up the rhythm of the starters, you're going to have to make an adjustment. But I could see opening night, I would say, yeah, let's start up Patrick Williams.
Kind of shocked to hear this. I'll go to you first, Keith, on this point. Aren't you at all concerned about the Bulls' lack of three-point shooting then in the starting lineup that opened up the space for guys like Zach and Kobe to attack the rim? Williams, without a doubt, a talented defender and skill galore, is not a better three-point shooter than Otto Porter Jr., and thereby, to me, not a better fit.
Well, if Wendell could start hitting even 20% of his three-pointers, that might balance out a little bit, because Zach, Kobe, and Lowry are all supposed to be at least average to above average three-point shooters. And I think to the point that Mark made, we do need scoring off the bench. So if you can make that move and have probably a better defender in Pat out the gate to protect Lowry and Zach to an extent, then having Porter coming off the bench when one of those guys goes to the bench, whether that's Lowry, Porter being a step slower, he might be better at the 4 right now. So I can see where your concern is with Pat starting, but there's a lot of reasoning that says Otto coming off the bench is better for the scoring balance on this team as well.
Doug.
Just don't think Otto Porter looks good at all. Just not at all. He looks like fat, out of shape, doesn't look like he can defend anyone. Still a smart player, knows where to be on the court, but just doesn't look like he came in ready. Would not reward him for anything. Not so sure he's going to help you so much with scoring off the bench. I just think he just blew it. I just think he lost the spot. And that just leaves Williams is the guy left. Like I just don't think Porter is. Man, he just looks like he just threw it in. He got his first contract. He's done.
Mark, do you agree with their assessment of Porter so far in this preseason?
Yeah, and I agree too as far as yeah, I mean, I agree that he hasn't been special during the preseason, and ultimately you're going with the future too. I mean, a lot of this season is going to depend on certain guys stepping up and us. I mean, the whole reason we kept this team is to kind of see what we got. So let's see what we could do with Williams. I mean, we should have. I mean, idealistically, a little bit of three-point shooting in the starting lineup because you are still relying a lot on Lauri Markkanen. Kobe White's advancement into what we anticipate him being this year is going to be a lot more three-point shooting than much more of a threat than he was last year. So, I mean, I think, granted, it would be nice to have another three-point shooter at the three. You might still have that in Williams because I thought he shot pretty well in the preseason, considering that I didn't even know that he was much of a three-point shooter coming into it. He looked okay from three.
I just think it's a really difficult situation. You're putting a young 19-year-old to have him start when a role he's not accustomed to. He didn't play at all. He didn't start at all in college. I think you're putting him in a position to maybe lose confidence early in the year. The best thing for him is to start out as a sixth man. And although Otto looks a little chubby, I think you're overstating his weight. He's not that fat, Doug. I think he's still, yes, he doesn't look great, but I still think when he's out there, he's a vet presence that will help stabilize. This is still a young team. This is still a very young guy. I mean, Kobe White is 20 years old. Wendell Carter Jr. is 21 years old. And how old is Lauri Markkanen? 23? Even Zach is under 26 years old. So I think you need at least one vet in that starting lineup, and throwing a 19-year-old in there will not benefit us in the long run. Let's go on.
They'll not get thrown in their first year at 19, 20 years old?
Yeah, but that was at a different stage of his rebuild. I mean, that was fine. And he was forced. He was forced in there because Nico got punched out and broke his jaw.
How about Isaac Okoro? Should he be starting or?
We're not going to bring up Isaac Okoro in this podcast.
Just not
or in this show. We're just going to bring up.
Just let him develop off the bench. Let him learn from the vets.
All right, let's go on to the next.
Issue number 3, will Zach LaVine be an all-star? Zach LaVine averaged 25.5 points per game last season, 12th in the league in scoring, but he was snubbed for a spot in the all-star team, with Russell Westbrook and Drew Holiday joining the Eastern Conference, making the effort far more difficult. Will Zach LaVine be an all-star this season? An injury to Kemba Walker, last year's starter, will help, but it's going to take a super effort for Zach to make the team this season.
Let's start out with you, Mark, on this one.
I think it's going to obviously be tougher with more players in the East. I also think, it comes down to winning. I mean, like if the Bulls are winning, I think that he has a good chance of being on the team. I mean, I definitely think that he's very underrated in this league. I don't think you hear a lot of people talking about him despite how good he is because the Bulls aren't good. But then I look at the All-Star votes for last year, and he had a lot of votes considering that we weren't that good and that he didn't make the All-Star team. He had more votes than Bradley Beal. He had more votes than a lot of guys. He had 175,000 votes last year. So, I think that there is an enduring popularity with the Chicago Bulls. If we can surprise people and be, a playoff caliber type team, maybe. But that would be the only way that it could happen because otherwise, the star power of a guy like Russell Westbrook and Drew Holiday is going to make it difficult for him to make the team.
What say you, Doug?
Really, it just comes down to whether or not the Bulls are good, and they're not going to be good. So no, he has no chance.
Okay, let's go over to you, Keith. What say you?
I don't know if the Bulls, even if they are good, if he has a chance. You have Kyrie Irving, who didn't make the team last year, Bradley Beal, who didn't make the team last year, both who probably make it this year, who are better than Zach. They only take 12 players. Being a top 4 or 5 guard in your conference isn't something that's easy to do. I think Zach even got a couple votes last year as a forward, and who knows, because we had Archie Diacono out on the floor, so maybe they thought Zach was playing small forward. I just think the way that it's set up, even though we're not even going to have a game this year, which makes it even harder because now if somebody's injured and they need an alternate, Zach can't get a vote in for the game either. It's kind of, I don't see it anywhere where Zach makes the team, and even if the Bulls are above 500.
Yeah. The good news is Trae Young made the team. His team was awful last year. Kemba Walker made the team last year. He's a guy who I think will fall off, obviously, being injured. Pascal Siakam, I don't think he's an easy, absolutely guaranteed to make the team. guy like Kyle Lowry, who also made a team last year. I don't think he's guaranteed as he's getting up there in the years. But Ben Simmons, Jimmy Butler, Chris Middleton, Bam Adebayo, Jason Tatum, Sabonis. Sabonis is another guy you may be able to knock off of there. But now with Durant in the East, it's really going to be rough. It really is. So the Bulls, I agree with you, Doug, that and Mark, they have to be good in order for him to make the team. Doug seems to think that they won't be. I'm a little bit more positive on it. Let's just say if they can end up being around 500 and he's leading this team to the 500 record, he absolutely will deserve to make the All-Star team.
Deserve and being able to make it, though, are two different things. I thought he deserved to make it last year, but like you say, there's a lot of guards there at the bottom that you're fighting for who also deserve to be there.
Yeah.
No one thinks they're going to be over 500, Fred. Even you don't think they're going to be over 500.
Approaching 500. I agree with you. They're not going to be 500.
Over 500, I think Zach can make it, even with the star power.
First 15
over
games,
500.
if you look at our first 15 games, by the time we get to the midway point of the season, we ain't going to be 500. Zach's going to be getting shipped out the door, not getting all-star votes.
But Keith, I know it looks that way, but it's very difficult to predict who's going to be available in this COVID era. It really is. And it's going to be – that's one thing I think the Bulls do have an advantage. I think we can hopefully all agree on that, is that they're pretty deep. They have guys that I think in the, Ryan A., Denzel Valentine that are 12, 13, 14, 15 on this team that could contribute and step up if there's injuries or COVID issues. I think the Bulls are better suited if you look at some other teams that if they lose their star, they're in big trouble. So it's going to be really difficult, I think, to kind of gauge how good these teams are going to be. Already Draymond Green is out for Golden State. That game, he may or may not be ready. That doesn't look anywhere near as difficult as it did if he's out of the game. Would you concur?
I would say if you have 7 guys on your team that are like the equivalent of an 8th man, you don't really have depth.
Yeah, just the lack of a star not being able to go out doesn't really make us better. It just means they're more interchangeable if they're lost.
We have a million guys that vie for the 15th pick. And it's like, you've got – that was what our last discussion was. So it's like, if one of our main guys goes out, especially Zach, the team's going to be garbage.
Come on.
Well, the dog –
equal replacement to anybody on our team or anybody else's team. If he's coming in, you're losing games.
The force of Dog Bowl Nation is very strong on this show this evening.
Don't
I'm trying to balance it. I'm trying to hold it together here. Let's go to the et cetera section again. Steven, this is not going to be any video. I want to call out our producer, Steven Johnson, who's doing a great job. But this is the part we just talk about some various topics. No videos are allowed, and we're just going to go roundtable discussion as we close up this baby. As we're on minute 18, I want to get it finished between 20 and 30. Should the Bulls sign Lauri Markkanen? We have a few days left. By the time this goes up, they may or may not have signed him. So the first question is, should they? Number 2, what is that number? What should he be signed at? When you consider a guy like Bertans signed for $15 million a year, I think those 2 guys are somewhat equivalent players. Obviously, Lauri's a better rebounder. Bertans is a better shooter in terms of three-point percentage. What say you? Let's start out with Doug. Let's start out with you on this one.
It really just depends on what he wants. Like if I say, yes, we should sign him, and then say the number is $8 million a year, clearly that's not going to happen. So
but you
under 15, and I think is reasonable. But I'd be okay letting it go. You're not gonna look back in 2 years and go, oh my God, we don't have Lauri Markkanen here anymore. He's just a guy.
Right now.
Yeah, and in 3 years he'll still be just a guy.
I can't wait for this to live on. We'll go back in 3 years and we'll look at this and we'll see who's right or wrong. I don't think he's just a guy. I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but I think he's going to be a valuable member of a winning team. Let's go over to you, Keith.
I think if you don't want to give up some free value, if you can come to a mutually beneficial contract between 15 and 18, you get it done, even if you just have the intent of trading Lauri in the short term. Having those extra years on the contract are going to get you the value that some teams might see in an offseason without top free agents to chase and a whole bunch of money, where, hell, I'll throw $22 million a year at Lauri Markkanen if it means I get him for free. I didn't have to give up a first-round asset of any kind. I get a lottery talent, and, there wasn't many better options out there anyway. So I think a lot of teams might look at that situation and feel comfortable in that idea. So if you're the Bulls, whether you want to keep them or not, and I think they only have 2 or 3 hours. I think the deadline's the 21st. for extensions, I believe. That's when the season starts. In total, the Bulls don't play to the 23rd, but I'm pretty sure the deadline is sometime on the 21st. So we'll know in the next day if Lauri Markkanen is going to have maybe a future here, or if he decides, which I think is in his best interest, to play it out to the offseason and see who throws a big offer at him.
Yeah, I agree. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it would have to be less than 15 million for me per season. I mean, regardless of which, if you lock up money in him, you're banking on him at least getting playing time. And when he's in the game and he's jacking up 9 threes a game, and he's hitting 1 or 2 of them, that's a huge liability for the team. I mean, I need to see more before we commit to him being a part of this team's future. And if it was just like at this very moment, whatever, in the next couple hours, yeah, unless it's a complete bargain, I would not give it to him now, because he'll be restricted next year, and then you could pay him based on what he actually earns.
Well, you might think he's not worth 15 million, but it doesn't matter what we think. That's what the market tells us he's worth.
If there's somebody else that's offering that kind of money, though,
here's the guys making between 15 and 17 million. There's only 12 of them, so I'll go through the list. Andre Iguodala, Valanciunas, Danny Green, Cody Zeller, Dennis Schroeder, Clint Capella, James Johnson, Joe Harris, Karis LeVert, Eric Gordon, Eric Bledsoe, Evan Fournier, and Ricky Rubio. Lauri Markkanen's better than the vast majority of players I just mentioned. So that's what the market is. He's between 15 and 17 per year. If he wants more than that, well, then pound sand. But if the Bulls are trying to offer it for 10 million, that's not proper market value. He's a $15 million a year player based on the fact that Bertans signed for that.
I don't know. Montrezl Harrell just signed for $10 million a year. I'd take him over Lowry.
That's a contender discount. You know that, Doug. Don't
maybe. The Bulls will be contenders. Did you hear Fred's prophecy of the sevens? We're going to win in 2 years. We should be getting contender discounts.
We have 2 top 10 players walk through the door, then we can start counting on discounts.
Well, Larry will be one of them for sure.
Let's stay on course here. Let's stay on course. Next topic. Let's get into prediction how the season's going to end for you guys. I'm really worried to hear Doug's total. So let's start out with you, Keith, on this one. How many wins will the Bulls have with the knowledge that 72 games, 36 wins would be 500 season? Where do you expect to see them, and will they make the playoffs?
I'm going to set the line at 30. I think they're going to be right at that point. And I don't know that they solidify a playoff spot outright, but I do think they will be in the mix for the play-in.
Okay. Mark?
I agree. I think they'll be in the mix somewhere around the 32, 33 win mark. I think the bottom of the East got better this year too. So, I think you're vying for only really that 8th seed is going to be, you have maybe 3 teams, Atlanta, Washington, and ourselves and Orlando, vying for that spot. Ultimately, I think that Washington's going to be better than we are. I think Atlanta's probably better than we are too. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. My gut does. But, if everything turns up roses, like I know that you think they will, Fred, then I think they have a shot.
Doug?
I think we'll be competing for 10th.
Okay.
Which, does get you into the play-in, which does give you a chance to make the playoffs. So if you count the play-in tournament as part of the playoffs, I think the Bulls will compete to be 10th and may or may not make it. They're like right on the edge of that. And I'd probably agree with Keith. Around 30 wins seems about right to me. And I am scared that this is going to be like 2017, the year like you should have been really bad, but you thought like, oh, let's just get some extra wins and let's avoid getting an amazing draft pick next year and a really strong draft and kind of not get our Luka Doncic because we wanted to chase the 10th spot.
Well, I think they're going to be 34 and 38. They'll finish the year 7th seed, 7th or 8th seed. They'll be right in there. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people and I think Kobe White's absolutely going to take a step. I think there's even Zach LaVine has ability to improve. Wendell Carter Jr. is going to be rock solid in the defensive end. Let's hope he keeps on shooting the 3 at a much higher rate, obviously. And I think Lauri Markkanen showed us some promise in that last game. The big picture, there's 7 more wins with this team just due to the head coach, who's not is completely competent, unlike his predecessor. I feel good about the Bulls this year. I really do. I don't understand all the negativity around the team when you look at the other teams in the East at that section. Like Washington's better. Yep. Atlanta, they still got some defensive deficiencies there, but they're right there with us. We were better than them last year. Charlotte's going to suck. The Knicks are going to suck. Like, what are we worried about? Like, are we that far behind Indiana?
Well, Charlotte added more talent than us this year. Washington added more talent than us this year. Atlanta added more talent than us this year.
I think for us, it's all about the growth of players. And I mean, for me as a Bulls fan, it's like, I'm not going to be happy. I mean, we've been rebuilding now for like 3 years. So it's like, I'm not going to be happy continuously fighting for a 10th spot. So my hope is that after this season, we have a good idea of hopefully who the foundation of this team is. That means that they played well. If Kobe and Zach, you could say at the end of the year, we're going to invest in these guys, we're going to build around them. That means they played well enough, hopefully, that we have the confidence that we have something. Because if we don't have that by the end of the year, we're 3 years into a rebuild and we really don't have anything. We just have Zach LaVine. So, I mean, my hope is at the end of the year, we see that we have some pieces, which ultimately makes it worthy to not have that pick. If we're good enough to not get a better pick this year, then, I mean, you'd like to see something hit, right? Otherwise, we're just going to be garbage forever.
Keith.
I feel we're a year behind. I do agree with your point that adding a coach like Billy definitely adds wins to this team. And it gives you the ability to see one of these core players become what they could become, because every coach we've had here since we started this rebuild did not present that opportunity to these players. So in that aspect, I hope by the end of the season we just have somebody emerge as maybe the guy or a solidified number two. But like Doug, I am worried that we're kind of treading in mediocrity and we are behind, and teams are taking a step forward, and we can talk about not having the cap to do things this offseason and all of our hopes and dreams of next year that are no longer there. So no, I'm on the side where I was optimistic like you for 2 years, and now we got the same roster and we're behind. So I'm just sitting here like, show me.
Sounds good. Final, to wrap up the et cetera section, let's go around. Who are your picks for the finals and to win the title? Start out with you, Mark.
Man, I don't like putting too much emphasis on preseason, but I thought Durant looked really good in the last game. I'm going to say it's going to be Brooklyn and the Lakers, with the Lakers doing it again.
Wow. Let's go over to you, Doug.
I'll go with Lakers Bucks, and I'll take the Lakers.
Keith.
I'm going to go with the Clippers. We're going to go with the other LA team. I don't think they choke this year. And I think the Nets. I think they're going to be a tough team to beat. If KD's 95% of the player he used to be, to me, he's the best player in the league still. And if you got that on your team, I think you always have a chance.
Oh, great job, Keith. You got it right in the West. The Clippers are going to come out and surprise everyone. This is going to be the first year. The age is finally going to catch up to LeBron James. We're going to see it this year for the first time in forever. And in the Eastern Conference, guess who's going to surprise everyone? Philadelphia is going to make that trade for Harden. It's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers coming out of the East. And what a final will be as the Sixers win the title and the Eastern Conference reigns supreme again. You heard it from me first. All right. So
okay, yeah, we better wrap it up, right?
No one else is going to say that. You'll be
okay, here we go.
Oh, boy.
Well, of course. No one has the gifts that I do.
You can't bank on a trade when you're making your picks. You can't bank on it.
Bank on it, buddy.
Well, even if it doesn't,
there's no way he's right. It's free money for everyone else.
Even if it doesn't happen, I still like the fact that they have a real coach now. They're going to be a lot better. I think the Sixers are going to be a better team this year. Like, who's going to win out of the East? Like, who else is going to challenge Milwaukee? Where do you have the Sixers? Who?
The Nets.
Well, we'll see how that goes. I don't know why you're so high. I mean, obviously,
he looked awesome. I mean, I watched the first game, where he hadn't played a year and a half. I mean, he looked awesome, like immediately. Yeah. I mean, as long as Kevin Durant's healthy, it looks like his shooting touch is there. He looks okay.
Hey, Kyrie smudging all the bad juju out of there. They're going to be good to go.
Oh, geez, Kyrie.
If Kyrie could be somewhat normal for a whole season, I would say the Nets are dangerous. I just don't trust them to be healthy or not crazy. I just can't wrap my head around both those things happening.
So they should trade Kyrie for James Harden.
All right, look, I want to go to, before we wrap things up, I want to go to this topic though specifically. If you're the Sixers, do you make that trade? If you're running the Sixers, let's go around. Keith, start out with you. Do you trade for James Harden?
I do not trade Ben Simmons, who I think has the potential to be an MVP caliber player down the road as these top tier players start to fall off, and he keeps seeing his sports psychiatrist to get confidence in shooting a jump shot. I do not trade him for had too many chicken wings over the offseason James Harden right now.
What say you, Doug?
It's hard to argue with that. If James Harden came in great shape, I would probably do the trade. But when you come in and you're like 20 pounds overweight, like that just shows a scary lack of commitment. And I just don't know in this year, it's going to be a weird year that you're going to be able to come back and play your way into it. If it's just Simmons and it's not a bunch of future assets, though, I probably would still do it. I'd take the chance. You got to roll your dice. It would give you a legit chance to win this year, and I think you take that chance if you can get it.
That's the right answer. Mark?
In a heartbeat. I mean, to me, Philadelphia is not going anywhere. They've gotten worse. I mean, they were like a bottom feeder last year in the playoff mix. I mean, they're not going anywhere. And if you want this process to potentially have some sort of a bright ending, you have to really shake things up. And I don't care what James Harden weighs. I mean, he's won the MVP. He's been amazing every single year of his career. I'll let his previous book of work do the talking. I would do that trade in a second. I don't like Ben Simmons at all.
See, I like Ben Simmons. I agree with you, Keith. I think it's a good trade for both teams because Ben Simmons is going to be better off getting away from Embiid. It's just not a good fit. I think this has been proven. And so I think he'd be better going to a team that's built around him with shooters and have him facilitate for everyone else and basically take on the Harden role that's been in Houston for the last 2 years, have him take over that role and run with that and have Harden come and play, who I think is a better fit with Embiid because he's a better shooter from three. I think it's going to be super exciting to see that team. And just think about how great that would be. You have the Eastern Conference where you're having, Boston battling with, the Nets and then the Sixers. It's going to be pretty awesome next year to have three legit
for everyone but us.
What do you mean? We're going to be right in there. We're going to be battling with those teams.
Just the cynicism in this show.
Regular season.
At least you have a play-in tournament now, so we have something to play for. There's a competition.
It's going to be great at the end of the year. I think we're going to have the highlights of this show. We're going to relive it, and I'll have you four guys on again, and we're going to talk about our predictions. And I'm just going to turn and say, feel free to comment, and then you'll comment.
Donkeys of the year on my first nights of the Roundball Table.
And then I'm going to have my cigar out there, and I'm going to be like,
or you can be like Michael Jordan on the ball.
No comment even necessary.
Yeah,
It's stuck. I called it.
All right, guys. I think this was, for the most part, a rousing disaster with the negativity. But overall, I really enjoyed having the conversation about the Bulls. I think this is exciting that we're even talking basketball. And I call an end to the meeting of the Knights of the Roundball Table. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much, guys, for jumping on.
Thanks a lot.